Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astar Sato Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premananda. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 13, Brahma Stealing the Boys and Calves, Text 54. Satya Jnananantananda Matraika Rasa Murtayaha Asprishta Buri Mahatmya Api Hi Upanishad Drisham Satya Jnananantananda Matraika Rasa Murtayaha Asprishta Buri Mahatmya Api Upanishad Drisham Satya Jnananantananda Matraika Rasa Murtayaha Asprishta Buri Mahatmya Api Upanishad Drisham Satya Jnananantananda Matraika Rasa Murtayaha Asprishti Buri Mahatmya Api Upanishad Drisham Jagannandananta Matraika Rasa Murtaya Asprishta Buri Mahatmya Api Upanishad Drisham Satya Jnananantananda Matraika Rasa Murtaya Asprishta Buri Mahatmya Api Upanishad Drisham Satya Jnananantananda Upanishadisham. Vaishnavis. Satya Jnanandamanda Asaika Rasamurtaya Sprishta Buri Mahatmya Upanishadisham. Satya Jnanandamanda Asaika Rasamurtaya Sprishta Buri Mahatmya Upanishadisham. Satya, eternal. Jnana, having full knowledge. Ananta, unlimited. Ananda, fully blissful. Matra, only. Ekarasa, always existing. Murtayaha, forms. Asprishta Buri Mahatmyaha, whose great glory is not touched. Api, even. He, because. Upanishadisham, by those jnanis who are engaged in studying the Upanishads. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. The Vishnu Murtis all had eternal, unlimited forms, full of knowledge and bliss, and existing beyond the influence of time. Their great glory was not even to be touched by the jnanis engaged in studying the Upanishads. Purport. Mere Shastra Gyan, or knowledge in the Vedas, does not help anyone understand the personality of Godhead. Only one who is favored or shown mercy by the Lord can understand Him. This is also explained in the Upanishads, Mundaka Upanishad 3.2.3. Nayamatma pravachanena labhyo na medasa na bahuna shrutena yam e vaishavanuti tena labhyas tas yaisha atma vivranuti tanum swam. Quote, the Supreme Lord is not obtained by expert explanations, by vast intelligence, or even by much hearing. He is obtained only by one whom He Himself chooses. To such a person, He is manifest in His own form. End quote. One description given of Brahman is Satyam Brahma Ananda Rupam. Quote, Brahman is the absolute truth and complete Ananda or bliss. End quote. The forms of Vishnu, the Supreme Brahman, were one, but they were manifested differently. The followers of the Upanishads, however, cannot understand the varieties manifested by Brahman. This proves that Brahman and Paramatma can actually be understood only through devotion, as confirmed by the Lord Himself in Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhaktyaham ekaya graya. Bhagavatam 11:14-21. To establish that Brahman indeed has transcendental form, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives various quotations from the Shastras. In the Ashvatara Upanishad 3.8, the Supreme is described as Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parasta. Quote, he whose self-manifest form is luminous like the sun, and is he whose self-manifest form is luminous like the sun and transcendental to the darkness of ignorance. End quote. Ananda matram ajaram paranam ekam santam bahuda drishyamanam. Quote, the Supreme is blissful with no tinge of unhappiness. Although he is the oldest, he never ages, and although one, he is experienced in different forms. End quote. Sarve nitya shashvatascha dehas tasya paratmanaha. Quote, all the forms of that Supreme Person are eternal. End quote. Mahavaraha Purana. The Supreme Person has a form with hands and legs and other personal features, but his hands and legs are not material. Bhaktas know that the form of Krishna or Brahman is not at all material. Rather, Brahman has a transcendental form, and when one is absorbed in it, being fully developed in bhakti, one can understand him. Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena. The Mayavadis, however, cannot understand this transcendental form, for they think that it is material. Transcendental forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his person are so great that the impersonal followers of the Upanishads cannot reach the platform of knowledge to understand them. Particularly, the transcendental forms of the Lord are beyond the reach of the impersonalist, who can only understand through the studies of the Upanishads that the absolute truth is not matter, and that the absolute truth is not materially restricted by limited potency. Yet, although Krishna cannot be seen through the Upanishads, in some places it is said that Krishna can in fact be known in this way. Upanishadam Purusham. He is known by the Upanishads. This means that when one is purified by Vedic knowledge, one is then allowed to enter into devotional understanding. Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. Tat Shradadana. Tat Shradadana Munayo Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam Bhaktya Shruta Grahitaya. Quote, the seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. Srimad Bhagavatam 1-12. The word Shrutagrahitaya refers to Vedanta knowledge, not sentimentality. Shruta Grahita is sound knowledge. Lord Vishnu, Brahma thus realized, is the reservoir of all truth knowledge, and bliss. He is the combination of these three transcendental features, and he is the object of worship for the followers of the Upanishads. Brahma realized that all the different forms of cows, boys, and calves transformed into Vishnu forms were not transformed by mysticism of the type that a yogi or demigod can display by specific powers invested in him. The cows, calves, and boys transformed into Vishnu Murtis, or Vishnu forms, were not displays of Vishnu Maya or Vishnu energy, but were Vishnu himself. The respected qualifications of Vishnu and Vishnu Maya are just like those of fire and heat. In heat, there is the qualification of fire, namely warmth, and yet heat is not fire. The manifestation of the Vishnu forms of the boys, cows, and calves were not like the heat, but rather like the fire. They were all actually Vishnu. Factually, the qualification of Vishnu is full truth, full knowledge, and full bliss. Another example may be given with material objects, which may be reflected in many, many forms. For example, the sun is reflected in many water pots, but the reflections of the sun in many pots are not actually the sun. There is no actual heat and light from the sun in the pot, although it appears as the sun. But each and every one of the forms Krishna assumed was fully Vishnu. We should discuss Srimad Bhagavatam daily as much as possible, and then everything will be clarified. For Bhagavatam is the essence of all Vedic literature, Nigama Kalpatarur Galitam Palam. It was written by Vyasadeva, Mahamuni Krite, when he was self-realized. Thus, the more we read Srimad Bhagavatam, the more its knowledge becomes clear. Each and every verse is transcendental. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is an amazing purport, and I concur with what Vishaka Mataji said yesterday in this connection, that, Srila Prabhupada lying on his bed where he was about to leave his body was still, nevertheless, by his intense, pure devotion to Krishna, able to dictate these elaborate purports which are full of deep transcendental meaning. I can barely grasp what's being transmitted here in such a lucid and complete way. In the first part of this purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that the personal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be understood very easily in the Upanishads. But then later in the purport, he states, yet although Krishna cannot be seen through the Upanishads, in some places it is said that Krishna can in fact be known in this way. Upanishadam Purusham. He is known by the Upanishads. And he explains that when a person is purified by the process of devotional service, one can understand the Upanishads in a proper way and perceive Krishna even in the Upanishads, although generally they present things in a way in which that is not immediately clear. Still, it is interesting to know that among the gopis there were different categories, and one of them was called the Shrutichari gopis, and these were the gopis who were formerly the personified Shrutis, the Upanishads and Vedas. And Srila Prabhupada explains this in the chapter of Krishna book, the personified Vedas. We've been hearing that these are the last, and this chapter is the last chapter of the Bhagavatam that was directly translated by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So we've only got a few more verses left. But it also happens that Srila Prabhupada did translate some of the later verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, for example. There are verses that of the Bhagavatam that come from after this chapter, and one of them that's quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita is Srimad Bhagavatam 10:87-23, which is one of the prayers of the personified Vedas. And in that prayer, it's stated, I'm going to read Srila Prabhupada's translation of that verse. The translation goes, the damsels of Vraja, the personified Vedas are saying this. The damsels of Vraja, the gopis, being attracted by the beauty of Krishna, simply wanted to embrace him and his arms, which are like serpents. Thus the gopis ultimately tasted the nectar of the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, we Upanishads can also taste the nectar of those lotus feet by following in the footsteps of the gopis. So in that translation of that verse from the prayers of the personified Vedas, Srila Prabhupada is saying that they're the Upanishads, and they're saying if we follow in the footsteps of the gopis who are always simply thinking of Krishna, trying to serve Krishna, then we too can attain that position. And that eventually did happen. they became the Shrutichari gopis, the gopis who had formerly been the personified Vedas. And Srila Prabhupada said they were the Upanishads. So, although the Upanishads are very difficult to understand, still, they themselves actually became gopis, great devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we understand the Upanishads in that way. And throughout his purports, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada is constantly quoting from the Upanishads and presenting them in the proper way that leads to the ultimate conclusion that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes these very important statements. We should discuss Srimad Bhagavatam daily as much as possible, and then everything will be clarified. For the Bhagavatam is the essence of the Vedic literature. Nigama Kalpa Taror Galitam Palam. It was written by Vyasadeva, Mahamuni Krite, when he was self-realized. Thus, the more we read Srimad Bhagavatam, the more its knowledge becomes clear. Each and every verse is transcendental. So, Srila Prabhupada dedicated his life to presenting the world with the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the late 1950s, when Srila Prabhupada was still in India before he came to the West, the main thing he was doing in terms of writing was writing his Back to Godhead magazine. He would write articles for the magazine, and then he would go to the printer, Hitsaran Sharma of Radha Press, and he would get copies printed, and then he would go out into the streets of New Delhi and try to sell them to people. And he even had an idea that if he got enough donations, he would print thousands and thousands of copies and send them to the United States and to England and to Germany and to the leading personalities in all of those countries. But the donations never came, so he kept distributing his Back to Godhead magazine. And then once a librarian told him, maybe it would be better if you wrote books, because newspapers are not permanent and a book is permanent. So Srila Prabhupada took that as an instruction coming from his spiritual master. So what book? He decided the most important thing would be to translate the Srimad Bhagavatam, because, as he mentioned here in the purport, it's the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic literature. Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Va Parai, it's stated. This beautiful Bhagavatam is written by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity. And what is the need for any other literature? It's such a great book. In the Tattva Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami. It's established as the primary Gaudiya Vaishnava literature. It's our main authority. So he thought, yes, let me begin translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. So at that time he was living in Vrindavan, and sometimes in Delhi. He had gotten a room in a small Radha Krishna temple in the Chippiwada district of Old Delhi, where there are very narrow, crowded streets. And he was given a room in that temple. Of course, ISKCON has now acquired that temple. If you go to Delhi, you can see it. Go to the room where Srila Prabhupada was translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. So sometimes he was translating at the Chippiwada temple in Delhi, or he was in Vrindavan, where he got a room at the Radha Damodar temple. Before that, he was in the Vamshi Gopal temple, but his service was translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. And eventually he was getting enough chapters done where he thought, now I can start the printing. So he went to his friend Hitsaran Sharma at the Radha Press in Delhi and discussed that matter. It cost money to print books, and Srila Prabhupada did not have money. So his friend Hitsaran Sharma suggested that he go to Gorakhpur, India, and talk to the head of the Gita press there, Hanuman Prasad Podar. And Srila Prabhupada thought, okay, he's a pious man, I'll go and see if he can contribute anything towards the printing of my manuscript. So at that time, Srila Prabhupada had 138 rupees to his name. It was going to cost 7,000 rupees to print the first volume of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which he hadn't even really finished translating yet. So he spent about half of the money he had to take a train to go to Gorakhpur, and he met this man, and the man was very impressed when he saw his manuscript, and he said, I will arrange for 4,000 rupees to be sent to your printer in Delhi. So Srila Prabhupada had over half of the money needed for the printing. And the system in India among the printers at that time was that if somebody wanted a book printed and they didn't have all the money, but they could give a down payment, the printer would accept the down payment, print the books, and then would give the author some copies, not all of them, and then the author would take those and sell them and get more money, make more payments, and eventually get all of the books. So that's what happened. Actually, Srila Prabhupada started printing at the Radha Press, but he wasn't really satisfied with the printing quality, with the type size. So he arranged for the printing job to be transferred to the OK Press, which is headed by a man named Gautam Sharma. So Srila Prabhupada would go to the paper shops, he would buy paper, arrange for paper to be sent to the printer, then he would oversee the printing. At first they would print what's called a proof, and then he'd correct the proof, and when it was all perfect, then the pages would actually be printed. And then when all the pages were printed, and he was continuing to translate as the different chapters were being printed. Finally, he finished all the chapters for the first volume of 3 volumes of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the pages had to be sent to a binder. They were bound by hand. And then finally all the books were ready. There was 1,100 copies, and the printer gave Srila Prabhupada 100 copies, and Srila Prabhupada went out into the streets, to the bookstores, to the government offices, and personally sold those 100 books. Then he went back and got another 100 and sold them, and so on and so forth, until he had paid for the entire printing of the first volume of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And one of the places where he sold his Bhagavatams was the United States Embassy, which had a program for buying books and sending them to universities in the United States. Once I went to the library at Cal State LA. I was doing some preaching on that campus, and I thought, well, let me go look in the library and see what's there. So I was looking, and I saw one of those Delhi Bhagavatams that Srila Prabhupada had printed and sold to the United States Embassy, in which the United States Embassy had sent to the United States before Srila Prabhupada even personally came. So I came back to the temple, and I mentioned to some devotee friend, oh, I saw this Delhi Bhagavatam at the Cal State LA University Library. And my plan had been to go back there, get a library card, check it out, lose it, and then pay for it. But this friend of mine, devotee friend of mine, said, excuse me, I got to go do something. And he immediately went out to the library, went into the library, got the book, dropped it out the window, went outside, picked it up, and he got himself a Delhi Bhagavatam. To the victor go the spoils. But in any case, so Srila Prabhupada had finished printing the first volume, and then he was translating the second volume of the first canto. And again, he had to raise money. The profit from the first volume wasn't enough to print the whole second volume. He still needed money. So he got a donation of 5,000 rupees from the head of a sugar company that he met. So he had enough to print the second volume. And then it was the same story. He did everything, got the paper, went to the printing press, supervised the printing, got the second volume. And then he needed to get money to print the third and final volume of the first canto. So he decided, let me go to Bombay, Mumbai. And he knew there's this pious lady, Srimati Murarji, who owns the Scindia shipping company. Let me go and ask her. So he went to her office, tried to get an appointment with the secretaries, and the secretaries were telling him, she's very busy, not today, maybe later. Srila Prabhupada was very impatient. He decided, okay, I'm just going to sit on the steps and when she finally comes out of her office, I'm going to talk to her. So he sat, for 5 hours on the steps of Sumati Maharajji's office. And, the different office workers were going by watching, what is this Swami doing, sitting on the steps here? Finally, she came out, and she noticed him, and her secretary is with her, and he asked, who is this Swami? And the secretary explained, and she went up to him and asked, what do you want? And Srila Prabhupada said, I want to talk to you. And she said, okay, tomorrow we'll talk. So he came the next day, and she agreed to give the money necessary to print the 3rd volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Srila Prabhupada was ready to come to the United States, and he eventually came. And he brought his Bhagavatams with him, and then he began to engage his disciples that he attracted in the United States to help him print the Srimad Bhagavatam, publish the Srimad Bhagavatam, distribute the Srimad Bhagavatam, and translate it into many different languages all over the world. So it's a great miracle, and we were all taking part in that in one way or another. We're involved in the production of Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam. We're involved in the distribution of Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world, the translation of the Srimad Bhagavatam into so many different languages. And each day, as Srila Prabhupada says here, we're discussing Srimad Bhagavatam. We should discuss Srimad Bhagavatam daily as much as possible, and then everything will be clarified, for Bhagavatam is the essence of all Vedic literature. Hare Krishna. Brief time for question or comment. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.